You gonna let me know? Okay. Oh, we're live. Okay. I didn't hear you. Sorry. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Silverline Live. We're debating on what to call it, but this is issue 2. This is our second installment. Tonight, we're actually going to get eventually around to talking about the craft of plotting a comic. So in the same way I asked you last week to bear with us as we kind of fumble our way through figuring out how all of this streaming stuff works, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Bear with us today and let us kind of figure out how this works. We learned a lot from last week's stream, and so hopefully we can apply a lot of that into today's stream, and you'll hopefully see a difference there. So first thing we want to do is spend a couple of minutes and introduce you to the crew, the Murderer's Row here. I'll go first. I'm Roland, and I am the writer of Cat and Mouse, and I am the wrangler here at Silverline. So next up on my list, we're going to go by the order that I see them on my screen. So next up on the list is Barb.
My name is Barb Kelberg, and I am the inker on Cat and Mouse. I am the inker and the creator of Divinity, the colorist on Sirens, and the CFO of Silverline. So I wear lots of hats.
Sweet. All right. Next up on my list of Murderers Row here is Brent.
I'm Brent Larson. I'm the creator and writer of the comic Kayless.
Excellent. John, you're up.
Hey world, how you doing today? My name is John Metych. I am the creator, writer, editor of the book Sniper and Rook, and I'm an editor at Silverline.
Sweet. And then I see that is Jeremy.
Yes, hello. I'm Jeremy. I am the colorist on Bloodline.
Sweet. Thanks, Jeremy. And then I see Sid.
And I am Sidney Williams, and I am the writer on Bloodline, upcoming comic from Silverline, and also Friar Rush, a 3-part miniseries coming from Silverline.
Which we'll be talking about a little bit the plot tonight. Next on my list is Thumbs Up Tommy.
Hey, everybody. My name is Thomas Florimonte. I am currently inking for Silverline the book's Trumps that Roland is writing. And there's another Thomas that is actually doing the penciling that is not on tonight. So it's going to get really mixed up when we keep talking about Thomas and Thomas.
Well, I've just been calling you Thomas F and Thomas H.
There you go. You can call me Tommy. That'll work.
And next up is Tim.
Hi, I am Tim. I am the associate editor with Silverline, and I help run and schedule the online content. And I'm also possibly the most heavily tattooed person in the lineup.
Probably so. And also, I've been lovingly referring to you, Tim, as COVID Tim.
COVID Tim.
Oh.
So I have to ask, especially since you're the last one here on the list today, I have to ask, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm pretty much all recovered at this point. It's was bad for about 6 days, but now feeling better. And tomorrow should be my last day in medically ordered quarantine.
Sweet.
And then you're just on regular quarantine at that point.
Yeah, now then
Like
it's
the rest
state
of
ordered
everybody.
lockdown.
Self-imposed quarantine.
Yeah. The state has a stay-at-home order now until April 28th, so I'm leaving quarantine to stay at home.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Congratulations
you
on that.
get a couple of hours to run around, and then you got to go back inside.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The county that Full Sail is in just ordered the stay at home. Florimonte, is that going to affect Kablam at all?
I looked through the what is it called, the paperwork that the governor wrote, or and I don't think so. They said that something to do, as long as we're dealing with mail order stuff, and then we don't deal directly with customers. They don't come into the shop to pick up stuff, that kind of thing.
Right.
I think we're still going to be good, but the orders have really slowed down. So we're thinking about go in when we need to get stuff out and just kind of, because everything is online, right? We do all of the work online. So we'll just do all of our processing files and redoing. We have a big redo of the website that we're going to be working on now too. So this gives us the time to finally do all the things that we've been needing to do for the past 15 years.
Yeah.
That we have not had time to do.
So this is a good time for me to maybe place a reorder, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
We could use the money. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I'll do that. I think I'll go ahead and place me a reorder of some books and get those in here for the conventions. I had a really light convention schedule for the first time at the early part of the year, but I got a couple of them lined up for the later part of the year.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, obviously, that we want to do here is we want to promote us, promote our books, promote Silverline. So one of the things we have going on right now is we have the Kayless Kickstarter. So Brent, can you spend a minute and tell us about the Kayless Kickstarter? And hold on, before we do that, I'm sorry, we have two people working behind the scenes. Brett Mann is basically our we're not really sure what to call him. He's our production techie guy. He's the one taking care of all of the images and streaming and all that stuff for us. And I'm asking him to do an awful lot of stuff. And it's not last week and this week too. I did a little bit better this week than I did last week, but I've come to him at the last minute saying, I need these images. I need these images. I need these images. And he's like, Dad, you got to get them to me sooner. Oh, if I didn't say it, Brett's my son. So so he's helping us out quite a bit by doing a lot of that, a lot of the streaming specifics, so that I don't have to worry about that. I can just kind of worry and focus on hopefully keeping us on target about the things we're going to talk about. And the other one behind the scene, Brett, did you say something? Yeah. And then the other one behind the scenes is my lovely wife, BJ, who is the BJ. Do you want to come on and say hello, or do you want me to just talk?
Hi.
So BJ is she's monitoring all of our chats right now. So we have we're streaming to Twitch, we're streaming to Facebook Live, and we're streaming to YouTube. So she's monitoring all those. She'll be making sure that we don't miss any questions when people post questions on the site, that we're going to be able to hopefully address all those and get any and all questions answered from folks out there. So all right, so back to talking about Kayless. So Brent, spend a couple of Brett. Yeah, John. So Brett, cue up the Kayless Kickstarter page, and if you that was the same one that we used from last week, I can send that to you if you need the link. All right, I'm sending it to you in the Facebook chat. But Brent, spend a couple of minutes and sell us Kayless. Tell us what is cool about Kayless, and tell people watching why they need to go and pluck down a few bucks to help us get to some yet unannounced stretch goals, but to get a cool story. Tell us about it.
Okay, here's where I get to do some acting. No, it's not that bad. I'm just really bad at promoting myself. Well, we're doing the second issue of Kayless right now, and I'm really excited. We're already up past 150% on our goal, and that's exciting. And I'm really continuing to just really blown away. I think this is number 2 of Kayless, which makes it officially the second comic I've ever written. And my first thought was the first issue was just going to be people trying to make me feel good about some midlife crisis I have not yet identified. So the fact that the second one is doing pretty good business I'm really excited about. But as far as the story itself goes, it's something that I've had percolating for over 10 years. I've been working on it for the last couple of years. And I've got several more to go. And yeah, it's a great story, I think. It's kind of government conspiracy kind of story. So you've got a guy who disappeared, an astronaut who disappeared on a secret mission back in the 60s, and suddenly he turns up today having barely aged, And he really is just focused on one goal, and that is to get back up into space. So we're going to be unfolding the story of where he's been, why he went up in the first place, why was he able to fall back to Earth without burning to a crisp, not even his hair, which, yes, I have an explanation for that, but I can't really go into right now. Who's he going to meet along the way? And what is this mysterious organization that's trying to keep him from going back into space? And in the meantime, he's going to hopefully foil a terrorist plot. So, if it was a weekend, then he had the time. So, how's that?
That sounds excellent. I think we all like to hear government conspiracies, particularly with the political state of mind today, right? We like to hear things like that. And I think the thing that interested me most about it, when you and I first talked about this, was the idea that the CIA sent an astronaut into the space into the 1960s, and I'm like, whoa, what? The CIA spent in the 1960s, and he's just now crashing back to Earth. So BJ, if you would go ahead and make sure you post the links to the Kickstarter now in all of our 3 places so that people can see them. So let's see what Jeremy's working on. Jeremy, what are you working on there?
Yes, I'm coloring in page 16 of Blood Chat at the moment. And how exactly do you want me to explain what I'm doing at the moment, I guess?
Say again?
What exactly do you want me to explain at the moment?
Yeah, just kind of tell us briefly about the process, kind of where you are in the process of the page and what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So basically, I've already went ahead and set out the main colors, how I want the characters to look. So basically, the basic colors, like the flesh tones, the colors of the jackets and so forth. So basically, this whole page have the main characters, how I want their underlying colors to look. So now what I'm doing is I'm putting in the rendering tones and the rendering I'm going with. What way I usually go about that is I have right here the main shadow colors and the main light color scheme I'm going for. Here's the shadows, here's the lights. So the way I usually go about it is when I want to start the shadows, I take the shadow color I'm using. I then go ahead and go to where I want to apply it. Suppose I want to add shadow to this character here. I find the area that's going to have the darkest part, the darkest shadow. I then basically go ahead and create the darkest area on the character. That's going to be the darkest shadow, the place that has the darkest cast shadow. I take that, and then everywhere else, that means I build up the shadow in every other area on that character.
So the little spots up at the top of your page, that is essentially kind of like a little painter's palette, so that you don't have to always go back into the Photoshop specifics. You can just go up there and touch that, huh?
Correct.
That's really cool. I don't think I've ever seen anyone do that before.
Yeah. So basically, the idea is that the color scheme right here is that since this basically is a horror type comic, I want the color, the shadows to be a cool color. Since the main color scheme is like reds and basically a lot of warm tones. So the warm tones cast cool shadows. So as a result, I want the shadow colors to be blue and basically cool colors.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I choose very dark blues for the shadows. So
sweet. And Sid, this is your book. Can you give us the elevator pitch of Bloodline?
Well, Blood is based on a short story from a collection called Under the Fang, and in the world of Under the Fang, it is a world ruled by vampires, and it's not a great way to live. It's kind of like living in a coronavirus world. The vampire rulers are not benevolent to the humans that are left. They traffic humans as blood sources. And our story focuses on a band of resistance fighters. And so we have some of our resistance fighters being painted there now. The girl is named Quicksand. The blonde guy kind of at the center is Dugan, our main character, and the character that undergoes change, if you will, and the Cajun is the other member of the resistance there. And Dugan is not in really good stand with the resistance, because he was previously kind of lost his soul when vampires took over, and he was actually a procurer of humans for vampires, but something changed him, and now he has to prove himself and work with the resistance as they try to hit an underground train that is transporting human victims. So big commando raid being executed here, and with characters that don't necessarily get along that well. So hopefully fun stuff.
Yeah, and so Bloodline is going to be another one of our books that we will kickstart here in the future. And I should add that one of the things that that we make sure that we do at Silverline is we make sure that the books are done by the time we kickstart. So we're in the middle of the Kayless Kickstarter. Kayless is finished. Got a few lettering editing things to do, but otherwise it's done. We could ship it tomorrow let me rephrase that. We could print it tomorrow and then ship it pretty quick. So it's ready to go. And Bloodline is the only thing left to do for Bloodline is the coloring for Jeremy that Jeremy is finishing up. So we're in very good shape with that. So once we get ready to kickstart that, it will be finished and ready to go.
One of the perks with the Bloodline Kickstarter is going to be a PDF of the original short story.
Yes,
as well. So so we get the Kickstarter supporters will get the comic and the original prose story, which was written by myself and a buddy of mine named Robert Pettit.
Yeah. So, and then that's one of the things we're trying to do with Kickstarters, obviously, is come up with fun things. But one of the things I wanted to add before we jump over to Tommy real quick is that this is something that we strongly believe in at Silverline, is making sure that we have our projects finished in time for Kickstarter, because we've seen, all of us collectively, we've seen too many projects that on Kickstarter and on Indiegogo that have funded, and then month after month after month after month go by, and fans and supporters are like, where's the book? Where's the book? Where's the book? And we don't ever want to do that at Silverline. We want to make sure that when you generously give your dollars to support our projects, we want to make sure that you get them. And so that's an important thing to us. And we want to just assure anyone who's out there maybe considering Kayless to realize that it's done. It's done. We just need to, navigate through the Kickstarter and then collect the monies and print and ship. So Florimonte, tell us, you're working on some stuff there too. Tell us what you're working on.
This is I'm inking your book. So maybe we should ask you to explain what Trump's is about.
So I can talk about that a little bit. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time, but what I want, instead of maybe me talking too much about the project, why don't you kind of tell us what you're doing specifically? Your ink, but talk to us a little bit about what you're doing there on the screen.
Yeah, I'm digitally inking this book. Normally we do it by on pen and paper with ink and brushes and all that kind of good stuff, but I am digital inking this on an iPad. So I basically scanned in the pencils. I converted them to a blue line kind of a thing. You can do it however you want, but I like doing it this way. And then I'm using Clip Art, the program. It used to be called Manga Studio. I think it's Clip Studios now. And you can see on the palette there on the, I know you can't see where I'm pointing at because it doesn't work that way, but on the left-hand side of the screen, I got my different brushes, and I got quills, and I got, different, size brushes. I can do all kind of crazy stuff, and I'm just going in here and I'm inking it, basically the same way as if I was to ink it on paper. So you can, I don't know how this is coming through, but you can see, is that coming through? Can you guys see what I'm doing?
Yes, that's absolutely coming through. We can see it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm just doing it the same way that I would do it by hand, but
and a little messy scritchy scratch there on the cheek
Yeah.
you need to get rid of.
Yeah. But yeah, so right now I kind of have a brush type of pen pulled up, as if it was like with the India ink and all the stuff like you would do on a regular sheet of paper, like on regular artboard, but I'm just doing it digitally.
Yeah, very, very cool.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about Trumps because it's one that's still on down the road a little bit. But in a nutshell, Trumps is a science fiction fantasy story based on a deck of playing cards in which each suit is a kingdom. And of course, like a card game, the kingdoms are at war. We'll talk more about that as we get closer. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, it was fun. So today we're going to do, we start the first of our series of comic reviews. And first up, we have our Silverline friend, Martin. Classic independent comic book reviews. So so Brett, cue up Martin Piero's Silverline crowdfund comic review.
It's clear that
Okay, so apparently we have a little bit of a technical difficulty, and there was no audio there. So you can see Martin has done this really nifty review, and if we can get it worked out, we'll come back and have the first of the Silverline reviews. If we can't get it worked out today, we'll make sure that we get it done next week, because I think this is going to be for me, it's an exciting segment to add. One of the things that I specifically mentioned in talking to people about reviews was no indies. We're only gonna. I'm sorry, no Marvel DC, only indies.
Only indies.
Yeah, so we want to make sure that our focus is only on independent comics. If you love Marvel DC, that's great. There are plenty of other options for you to get Marvel and DC reviews. So we may, if our technician can figure it out, we may give it another shot, and if we can't get it to work, we'll just we'll put it off till next time. But one of the things that I would normally do right after the stream would be to, at least in my plans, is to give a little mention to a a sponsor, which we don't have yet. And I am I am trying to work on that, Florimonte. I have a sponsor resource.
Uh,
I have a sponsor resource.
the audio, I can't hear.
Cutting out
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Cutting out.
So
I
I
told you
feel
who
pretty
to talk
sure.
to.
Yeah, I think part of what it is we kind of got to come on and show that we're going to be on here every week, and then our sponsor is going to say, "Hey, it's no longer something that you've been talking about for the last 8 months. You're actually doing it," and then we might get a sponsor. So I hope to be able to do that maybe next week or the week after that. I know COVID has kind of made some weird things happen, but yeah, I hope to be able to mention a sponsor right here. So how about it, Brett? We want to try it again.
That means no.
A few more seconds. So we are in the middle of Kayless. I was talking to someone the other day. Silverline, look, we're gonna try once we finish Kayless, right? This is March. We're gonna try to get them shipped June, probably end of June, because by the time we get money from Kickstarter, get the books printed and shipped out, probably be the end of June, and then we're gonna immediately launch into another Kickstarter, which would be March, April. That would be in May. So we're going to do a Kickstarter in May. We're going to try to fulfill those in July, and then do another Kickstarter in August, and get those fulfilled June, July, August, and September, and then probably do another one in October. Literally, we have those books 85% ready. As far as if all of those months were to drop right now, we have those books 85% ready that we could run them. So I gotta say, y'all, I'm excited about that. I'm excited that we've got this kind of product that we're literally kind of lining things up, queuing things up, as you might suggest, to go to Kickstarter. BJ, were there any other questions on any of the forums?
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Okay.
There was on Facebook. I've got two for you
Okay.
for right now. Mark asked, what will be the big show after everything calms down? Where will Silverline creators gather? A convention, a store signing?
So that's a good question, Mark. Thank you for answering it, asking it, I should say. So I don't know that we really have a big one. Barb and I have been talking about this for months and months and months. Part of the challenge for Silverline is that we are so geographically dispersed. Barb is way up in the frozen north in Wisconsin.
Yes.
Okay, I started to say
Yes,
Minnesota.
Wisconsin.
Yeah. Tim is all the way over in Oregon.
Yep.
Kahn is in Illinois. Sid is up in Virginia, and of course, I'm down here in Florida. So we're scattered about. So it's going to be tough to get this all in one place. If you were to ask me to name a home convention, as of now, that's Daytona Beach Comic Con. The folks who run Daytona Beach Comic Con are very good to us. They gave Silverline a nice. They supplied us with a nice little booth last year, gave us a promotion, and it looks like we're gonna do it again this year. So Daytona Beach Comic Con would get my nod for that. I would like to find something central U.S. though, so that I could convince Barb to meet us somewhere, wherever that is, and we could kind of all meet there in the middle somewhere. But I don't have that.
I'm voting for Memphis.
Well, I told you what. I did reach out to Memphis, and I told you what they said. Yeah, he basically told me they're.
Graceland.
Yeah, they're all. And I could probably get in the other Memphis show, but they're not real comic centric. So it would just be us doing it for the sake of doing it. What was the other question then, BJ?
The other question is off of Facebook also, and it's from Sean. What type of paper do you print on? Newsprint or more modern?
You know what? That's a great question, and I am so glad that we have Tommy here, because Tommy can tell us all of the ins and outs of Kablam Silverline prints. I'm not going to say exclusively, but pretty much everything we've done so far has been printed through Kablam. So, Tommy, tell us about the paper.
We print on the Kablam, prints on it depends on if you want to go with a thicker cover stock or not, but it's a 70-pound gloss interior paper, and then a 80-pound gloss just to give it a little thicker of a cover. But then you can also, we can go with a really thick cardstock cover if you want to do some sort of a, real nice thick cover that you can also sketch on if you like. So it's an 80-pound gloss paper with a 70-pound gloss paper with an 80-pound cover stock.
Definitely modern versus the newsprint, as they were asking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is the newsprint is pretty much a thing of the past. You can go some places and get that, get newsprinted stuff done, but I don't even think our presses would let us run newsprint through them. So I know our printer techs would be really mad if we ran newsprint through our machines. So
Okay, very cool. Hope that answers the question.
Okay.
So I got a note from Brett. He says that he's ready to run the review, but we are going to have to be silent for the review. So everybody mute your microphones, and let's try this one more time. We're going to have Martin T. Piero giving us a crowdfund review.
Mark with Cosmic Times here. My friend Roland asked if I could come on and talk about some of the independent comic books I've read recently, maybe give him a review. So I thought, why not come on and talk about some of the books that I've gotten through Kickstarter? Like this book right here, Broke Down and 4 Dead Bodies, issue 1. Issue 2, I've already gotten it. I backed it on Kickstarter, got that as well, and I believe I just backed issue 3. So I think it's about time we talk about issue 1. So let's do it. Let's check out Broke Down and 4 Dead Bodies, issue 1. Broke Down and 4 Dead Bodies, issue 1 is written by Travis Gibb with art by Felix Novara. Let's see what the back says. The back says, after years of being on the bottom, Randy and Denver are finally on their way to being made men. It seems that someone has other plans though, and now a simple drop has them broke down on the side of the road with 4 dead bodies, and hence that's our story. Broke Down and 4 Dead Bodies, issue 1. I backed this on Kickstarter a little while ago. I've already gotten the second issue in, and like I said, I backed the third one, so I definitely am a fan of this series. The story opens 5 years in the past with a convenience store robbery gone wrong. We're introduced to the character Denver and Mr. Washington, which kind of sets up the story. So this is a bit of backstory. Then we cut to today in Canyon City, Colorado. Then we quickly smash cut to prison. And our other protagonist, Randy, is introduced. He is being released and confirms that he did his time and never rolled over on Mr. Washington. Now here's where it gets a little confusing. There's another time jump to 4 days later and then to now. This is where it's confusing because is today? So this is the same day as now? That's what I'm a little confused about. But anyways, these time jumps all work themselves out and the story keeps moving right along. It's clear that things have not gone very well for Randy and Denver. Their cars broke down, and guess what? There's 4 dead bodies in the back seat. So I guess the title was spot on. There's another time jump to 3 hours ago, and we see where things started going south for Randy and Denver. There was a drop, a deal, things went wrong, lots of gunshots, lots of violence, a little bit of blood here, we don't need to show that. All kinds of action, and a lot of profanity. I don't want to reveal too much, but Randy and Denver were double-crossed, and things go from bad to worse for these two, as they're just trying to stay alive and ahead of the bad guys. Again, I don't want to spoil too much. I will say, part of the charm of this book is the dialogue between Randy and Denver. It's very well written, The character actions are spot on. They seem like real people. So out of anything in the story, this was my favorite part. They're definitely well thought out characters. I will say the story leans a little on its Tarantino influences and doesn't seem to quite find its own voice. It feels a little too Tarantino. But again, Tarantino films are good, and this is a well-written book. So if you're into Tarantino, I would highly recommend checking out Four Dead Bodies, or Broke Down in Four Dead Bodies by Travis Gibb. He's publishing it under the Orange Cone Productions. So you can find them online at brokedownandfourdeadbodies.com. This book is not for the kids. It's not for everybody. Like I said, lots of profanity, lots of violence, lots of action. Not necessarily something you want to leave around for the kids to check out. But if you're into the Tarantino films, you're into that kind of crime noir and ultra violence, this definitely is the book for you. Now, Roland wants me to do a grading system, so let's do it. Writing, I'll give it an A. Definitely well-written book. There's a few issues I have here and there. For the most part, it's tight. Like I said, it leans a little too much on the Tarantino influence, but the dialogue is so well written and the characters are so well defined. Easily an A for writing. The art, it's fine. It's good. There's not a lot of, nothing too exceptional about the art. I mean, this profile shot, it's well done. The characters are easy to identify. For the art, I'm going to give it a B. It's great, it's good, but it's not exceptional. Lettering, I guess I'll give it a B. Maybe I might lean towards C, but I'll give it a B for this. The tails are a little wonky. It doesn't quite, everybody's going in the right direction. You can definitely tell who's talking, but every now and then, there just seems to be a few little errors here and there with the lettering. Nothing bad. Again, I can't say there's anything wrong with it, so I'll just give it a B. Literary merit, that's a tough one. I don't even understand what literary merit means per se. But as far as I interpret it, I'll give it a B. It's definitely a good read. It's well worth checking out. I highly recommend it if you're into these kind of stories. And fun factor, I'm going to give it a C. I'm giving it a C. It's a personal choice on mine. Other people might give it an A. I'm just not a fan of profanity in comic books. Violence is one thing. The violence is a little overdone. I probably shouldn't be showing that. But it fits the style and tone of the book. Just not my cup of tea. So for fun factor, I give it a C. I know it's not the best mark, but again, it's a personal choice. It's not, this is my review, my personal review of the book. So I give the fun factor a C. That overall grade comes to a B. This definitely would be an A for some people. For me, it's a B, because again, this isn't necessarily my type of story. It's the kind of stories I like to read. However, I know there's a lot of people that love this kind of books. And if you're into crime noir or the Tarantino thing, definitely check out Broke Down and Four Dead Bodies. Issue 1 and 2 are currently available, and they just kickstarted issue 3, so that should be available pretty soon. So also look for the issue 4 Kickstarter. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's going to launch sometime in October or after October. So that's about it for my review of Broke Down and Four Dead Bodies, issue 1.
All right, thank you. So that was Martin Piero, who is the head honcho also at Cosmic Times, or our pals over there. Thank you for that, Martin. You're going to see more reviews from Martin in the future as well. So I got a note from BJ that says, she says we've got a couple of comments, and then we'll get into the craft. What do you got, BJ?
They're both from Oven, and the first one, he responded, I respect that commitment to your stories, and that's in response to Sidney, Sid, what you had said earlier. And then the second one is, this is one you showed me at Trouble's Little Sister responding to Trump's when you had shared some of the artwork that was really exciting.
Yes. Yes, I did have some of that there with me then, and shared it there. So, well, thank you, Oven, and we're glad to see you here again this week. Hopefully we'll see you. You'll be a regular, and we'll see you every week. So now what we're about to start is what I call what we're calling the Silverline craft, and tonight we're segment becomes is sort of not necessarily a tutorial, but a kind of a how-to, a help, if you will. Silverline is blessed to have some seasoned professionals that have been doing comic books for years, and it's my hope that part of what we talk about here can help those who are still early in their comic career. I have a tendency to use the term rookie because I'm a sports fan, but rookies who are just getting in and want to make a mark. That's my goal with this, and I think from my experience, everyone here at Silverline is more than ready and willing to share their wealth of knowledge and experience. So tonight we are talking about plot. So I'm just going to kind of go down the row here. I'm going to ask the first question to the murderer's row here. Is the first question is, how did you get the idea for your project? And so Barb's the first one up here. So Barb, talk for just a minute on how did you get the idea, or where did that come from for Divinity?
Well, strangely enough, I've been a creative writer for years, but I'm professionally an inker. And my best ideas, strangely, come from very vivid dreams. And they come fully formed. The plot is all there. The characters are all there. I see them, how they look. And when I wake up, I scribble it down. They're very fully realized when I wake up. The only thing that I need to do after that is I need to flesh it out. I mean, I don't dream the names. I have to come up with the names and the backstories, and hammer out the fine details. And I'm very, very detail oriented about the common sense aspect of stories. Like if something happens in the story, why did that happen? It has to make sense. You have to be able to explain it. You can't just drop something in the middle of a plot and say, oh yeah, well, oh, I forgot to tell you, this happened. You know, you have to have us all explained out before you go into it. Unfortunately, I am not a scripter. I have the ideas, I can create. I got straight A's all through college in creative writing, but that's literature. That's not scripting a comic book, which takes a whole different talent than what I have. So for Divinity, I brought in R.A. Jones to script it for me. We hash it out, we talk it over.
But what you do is you talk over the plot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The plot. He throws out some ideas. I'll throw out what I don't like, and I'll tell him what I do like, and we hammer it out that way. Divinity is about a 12-year-old girl who has the ability to heal, and her brother, a Marine, half brother, he gets a call to come home. His parents have been killed. His father and his stepmother have been killed in an accident. So he's given a hardship discharge. He comes home. He's the only family member left. And he arrives home and he's very suspicious about how the parents died. He starts to look into it and he discovers that his sister can heal. So now, of course, this sets off all kinds of alarms, and we begin to uncover this sinister web. Somebody wants to get their hands on Divinity. Her name is Divinity, and she goes by Vinny. We have Zach and Vinny, brother and sister, and they need to go on the run because he needs to protect his little sister from the forces out there. And they hook up with one of his ex-Marine friends, Olivia Barnes, and their focus becomes protecting this 12-year-old girl. Now, most people would think, oh my God, that would be such an amazing blessing to be able to heal. But really think about it. Would it be a blessing or would it be a curse? Because if anybody found out that you had this ability, you'd be sought after, you'd be mobbed, you wouldn't be able to walk out of your house. I mean, think about it in the context of the crisis that we're going through right now. There's no way that you would be able to heal everybody. You'd be overwhelmed. Not only that, but every government would want to get a hold of you, every pharmaceutical company. every dictator, every mobster. You'd want a evil scientist would want to tear your brain apart and see what makes you tick. It's got a lot of different storylines and places that it could go, and there are no other superheroes. These are ordinary people. The only one that has any ability in a story is this 12-year-old girl. So we have plenty of evil in the world without having to come up with supervillains.
And this all
And
came
that's
to you in a
basically it.
dream,
Yeah,
right?
all
Yeah.
came to me in a dream.
Very cool. So next on the murderers row here, Brent, what about Kayless? Where did you get the idea for Kayless? And we'll talk about kind of how you turn that into a plot and everything after. But where did you get the idea for Kayless?
Sure. I should probably mention beforehand, I am one of the, in a sense, I am one of the rookies you were just referring to. I will say I am a seasoned screenwriter, which is to say that
you're a seasoned storyteller.
I'm seasoned. I think it was Commander Riker that said seasoned. What a terrible thing to say to a man or something like that. But anyway, I got the idea for Kayless a long time ago. I've read comics since I was a kid, and I've always been fascinated, not just with, frankly, one of the places I get my ideas is when I see something else that I like, and then my mind starts wandering on how I would have done it. And I've always been fascinated with the Superman story and the Fantastic Four story and just superhero stories in general. But part of the reason is because I think it's kind of a goofy idea for someone to get powers and then think that the next logical step is to strap on a cape and go and save the world from bank robbers and this and that. And so I started thinking, well, what would happen if a normal person got powers and then tried to fix the world and everything went terribly wrong? And what would that person do? Would they just say, oops, my bad, and try to go back to the way things were? Or would they try to fix it? And how far would they go to fix it? And what would happen if things just kept getting worse? And my original thought was, I wish I could write that as a screenplay. I don't think it would fit the format. I started thinking maybe a TV show, but I don't know anything about writing for TV, and you kind of have to break into the industry a different way. And then I just thought a couple years ago, this idea just isn't going away, and I love comics. I should just learn how to write for comics. And maybe at least that way I can story out there. But that was just a loose plot. And what's funny is since then, I've taken it so much farther than I ever initially thought. And that's kind of the fun part about the whole creative process is I'm already at a place that's very removed. I think probably as I continue to think about the story, it'll change even more. That was part of it. But another thing, I think Barb actually was alluding to this. Yeah, I feel like I don't just want to tell a story. I feel like I have something to say. If I don't have something to say, then frankly, I'm probably wasting my time and the audience's time because there's so much content out there to watch or read, more so than ever before. It's definitely a first world problem that, I spend more time organizing my Netflix queue than I do actually watching anything in there. And it frustrates me that I don't have more time, but it also makes me more choosy about what I'm reading and what I'm watching. And I would need it to be really good. And I need it not just to be good, but I need for it to say something about life, what humans are all about. Is there such a thing as ultimate meaning? What is the nature of right and wrong? All these things in some way or another, if it's fleshed out in any kind of a story, then I want to know what it has to say, even if I don't personally agree with what it's saying. And if it's not, if it's just, check it out, I'm going to have this totally cool story where Wolverine attacks ninjas to save this person. Well, what are you trying to say? Well, nothing. I just think it'd look really cool. I'm already starting to lose interest. I just need it to be deeper than that. I think if that can be achieved, then I think especially when that's something I'm trying to build in my own writing, then that's when I get even more excited about the story I'm telling. So.
Very cool. John, what about you? What about Striper and Rogue? Tell us, not just me, tell us, where did you get the idea for Sniper and Rogue? You're muted, John. Still muted. Still muted. Still muted. Hover your mouse over the hangout there, then you'll see a microphone pop up. Then you can.
All right, I'm back.
There.
Good. All right. So I was kind of like sketching out some notes as we were all talking, because if you wanted to go back to the original ideas of Sniper and Rook, what I wanted a team book, and a duo, a pair, a male, a female. I was born in the 70s, child of the 80s, so that really influenced what I wanted. I wanted a guy and I wanted a girl. I don't know how. Maybe I could have been affected a little bit by yourself, Roland, with Cat and Mouse, because you had a guy and a girl, and I was like, I kind of want my own version, but differently. But I was kind of going through the other things that were really influential to me at the time, that went along with some spy stuff too, like Moonlighting. David and Maddie. Holy cow, that was awesome. Remington Steele with Remington and Laura. My mom watched General Hospital, so I got stuck watching General Hospital. But you had like the World Security Bureau with Robert and Anna and Frisco and Felicia. X-Files, 90s, Mulder and Scully. So there were a lot of great guy-girl duos, and that's kind of really what I wanted to bring forward, and that's where it started. But then it kind of quickly stalled, because I'm like, okay, so I got a guy, I got a girl, I got names for them, Sniper and Rook, really cool, but what do they do? The first one, and I don't believe I'm putting it out there for the world to hear, I was desperately coming up with some way to do this, and I was like, okay, well, what if Sniper's an actor? And he doesn't have that name, and he shoots somebody to save somebody. The media gives him that name, and he hates it. And there's a seamstress who wants to be his partner and makes herself her own costume and follows him along without him wanting her there. And I'm like, yeah, I just ripped off Roland's Cat and Mouse. Yeah, not a good idea. Then the next concept I came up with, this one would have been during a political time where we had the Captain America story going on, with Cap getting kicked out of his uniform, becoming the Captain, my favorite comic story of all time. So there was like a commission that decommissioned Sniper and Rook, saying that they were too American, they were a threat, kind of sidelined them. He wound up as a sub teacher, she wound up as an artist, then they get pulled back together. That one derailed because one of my very best friends was the artist on that, and it was supposed to be a complete spy story. And one day I called him up and I'm like, hey, Brian, did you get any work done on the book this weekend? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, what'd you do? And he's like, oh yeah, I got them in a bar. I'm like, what are they doing in a bar? And he's like, they're fighting my vampire. I'm like, what's a vampire got to do with the spy story? So we decided we could be friends or work together, and so we're still friends. And then kind of where it evolved to and where I really got to, I got to the point where I mapped out what I wanted to do with them. And the real tipping point was I was no longer trying to write a Sniper and Rook story. I wind up writing them more as Jack Barton, and Rebecca Page. So once I got to know who the characters were, the story and the plot came so much easier. The first 5-issue story arc, which is in the Sniper and Rook collection, the first 5 issues is a full story that got my spy story out there. It is world hopping. They meet some allies, they meet some enemies, they meet some in between, which was great. As I plotted it, I knew where I wanted the story to start and where I wanted the story to end at the end of issue 5. And then I kind of laid it out so each issue ended on a little cliffhanger of its own to bring you back for the next episode. When I went back to take a look at all of my old versions of things that I trashed and said that wouldn't work, I picked and chose some of those other things. Some of the traits I wanted for Sniper and Rook from that second one. Originally, they were going to be, in the Vietnam War at one point, but now they were too old. So I used that as some of the background for one of their enemy duos. again, a duo. If anybody read the whole write up this week about the Cat and Mouse original series on the Silverline post, there's a big story about foils. So I had some foils in there too. The foils thing article written by some hack named me. Please go check that out if you haven't yet. So really, as I start writing and plotting through and get an idea, A to B, how I get there, I kind of let a movie run through my mind. And I'm very visual. That's why sometimes you'll see
that is kind of the next question, though.
Yeah. Oh, so should I stop?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop for now. But yeah, it works well for me. And I'll get into that more with the second question. And the last thing is when I start plotting and with the creation of characters and stories, Sniper and Rook specifically, I designed at that point to be two characters that I could drop into any sort of genre and have it make sense. When Spider-Man would go up against Mephisto, it's like, yeah, it doesn't really make sense, you know, way too unbalanced in power. But with Sniper and Rook working for the government, now I could have government conspiracy, I could have alien stories, I could have everything in between. And it makes sense within the confines of their job.
Sweet. Okay, Sid. It says Sailor down here on my screen. Sid the Sailor. What about you? What about where did the idea for Friar Rush come from?
I think I mentioned, briefly, kind of brushed over that last week. One thing you're always looking for, I think, in storytelling is something that hasn't been tapped as much. And I had an encyclopedia of the arcane with little encyclopedic references on various strange phenomena and things. And one of the entries in there was about Friar Rush, who was a figure from the 1400s. And there's a bit of verse, a book of verse that tells his story. But he was a demon who specifically targeted men of the cloth and women of the cloth and wanted to corrupt them. And so that was it was literally about that much copy in the encyclopedia. And I started thinking, well, what if he was able to get into the present day, what would he do? And I started thinking that he would want somebody that had good intentions, but that he could bend and corrupt, and he would look for a way to do that with the most damage. And of course, when we first started talking about Friar Rush back in the day, it was back when a lot of the televangelism empires were crumbling because of foibles and things like that. And so I thought, well, he would want to reach a guy that had a big audience and that it would affect a lot of people if he fell. And so he focuses on kind of a mega church televangelist type. And he said, you like being a minister, but you really want to be a rock star, don't you? And so that's where, bringing him into the present day kind of took things. And also, of course, I needed characters to oppose him. And I think characters are really interesting when they're flawed. And so I started looking for characters who would be the right characters to try to deal with him. And my protagonist is a guy named Jake McGlover, who is a reporter, but he was a seminarian and he grew impatient with becoming a priest. He was going to become a priest, and he grew impatient. He wanted to help the world. He wanted to change the world, but it wasn't happening fast enough. He had some other problems, and so he has, gone out into the world to be a journalist and tell stories. And he picks up the trail of Friar Rush and realizes that he has to do something, or a lot of damage is going to be done. And I think Friar Rush is an interesting figure as he took shape for the comic anyway. He is a trickster villain. He will do mischievous things and mischievous things, and he will manipulate people, find people that can help him. But he also has some, pretty magical, strong magical powers too. So we will see him do a lot of interesting things when the comic is actually in people's hands. But again, a little nucleus. I've had things come to me in dreams like Barb before, and I've had them come different ways. But for Friar Rush, it was that little bit of information and then sort of a logical progression.
Cool.
That developed it.
Nice. I think we're going to actually go in the reverse order now to deal with my second question here. So, so the first question, just where did you get the idea for the project? So, after you get the idea, so what we want to do now is after you get the idea for this project, how do you take that idea and turn it into a plot? You got the idea for this. How do you turn it into a plot that is a story?
Starting with me?
Yeah, starting with you. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
No problem. It's been said that a sculptor will take the big block of granite or whatever and just chisel out the parts that don't belong. And that's not exactly what I do when I'm plotting, but I kind of sit down and I start to put fingers on the keys, not pen to paper anymore for writers, I guess, but put fingers on the keys and I sort of discover the story. It sort of takes shape for me, and I guess it's all there, and I'm kind of hammering out the parts that belong and leaving the things that I don't need. But I sort of develop a vision of overall where the story is going. And I think, of course, about key incidents, exciting things, because we need character development in the story, of course, but we also need, especially in a comic, because it's a very visual medium, we need things happening visually, conflict in big ways that fills the page and everything. So I start thinking, well, what would Friar Rush have at hand that he could throw against people trying to oppose him? And also, where would he go with, what would he do to try to corrupt a guy and then make the corruption affect other people? And of course, you have to think of that across several books if it's a miniseries, and have meaningful punctuation points. We build to cliffhangers at the end of individual issues, and so it's just I kind of first sit down and kind of foment those ideas, I guess, and get the basic notion of where it's going to go, and then just sit down and really start to write, think about who the characters are, and put them through their paces. And happily, I know some people really outline and really carefully plan out. I'm kind of able to have it all in my head in a way, and I kind of know, okay, I need to get to this, and I need to get to this point, and here something blows up real good, and things like that. So again, it's kind of all in my head, and it's just chiseling out what I don't need and channeling what I do need, and telling a coherent story as it goes.
Very, very cool. All right, so going back the other way again is John. So John, what about you? You got the idea for Sniper and Rook. How did you take that idea and then turn it into a plot, which is then a story?
For a lot of what Sid just said, I could say ditto, but that would be cheating. Kind of like I was mentioning before, when
I'm glad I got to go first.
Well, that's why I went one way one time and the next way the next time.
Yeah, it's so fun to hear, when people have similarities and differences to the craft. Once I had the concept, I knew where I wanted to start, at A. I knew where I wanted to end up at B. But for the first 5 issues, I truly did not know how I was going to get there. Literally, as I started writing and plotting, like the first issue, it really hit. And, people mention, dreams being a good influence. They get ideas from that. My mind just took over. You know, like I was mentioning before, I'm very visual, and I just kind of let my mind go, and I let the scenes play out in my head, how it would look as a movie. And I basically took, you know, kind of like what Sid said, you know, major points, what I called screen caps at the time. It's like, oh, this one's good. I'm going to put that down in this panel and this one into that panel. When I work with artists, I'm not very good with the really loose Marvel style where, hey, here's 2 pages. This is what I want done. Take 24 pages and draw it. I'm pretty detailed where I want, you know, page by page, panel by panel breakdown. I send suggested panel layouts. So that way, kind of like Sid was talking about, and I mentioned before, each issue ends on a cliffhanger, but I also try to pace it so each right-handed page has a cliffhanger to make you want to turn to the next page. So that's one of the key ones when it comes to me to plot the whole thing out.
It might not surprise you that I actually teach that in my class.
You know, that is awesome to hear. So it means I've instinctively been doing something right. That is cool. I love hearing that. The other thing that really comes into play with me, because I do not draw, I'm very visual, but I can't put that down on paper. But I also try to pair up stories and plots for the stories based upon the artist I'm about to work with. Different artists have different styles, some more conducive to other stories than not. So once I have an artist that I'm interested in working with and who wants to join the Sniper and Rook team, I try to plot a story based upon their strength as artists and also sometimes interests too. So for me, it's kind of like a hodgepodge of all of those things. But once it starts, the mind takes over and I get the little movie going in my mind. And sometimes it goes in areas I didn't even think of going into. Take the screen caps, put those down, write that out for my artist, and then they go to town. And from there, I script.
Sweet. Sounds like a cool plan. Always good to know that, you know, you're even though you weren't formally kind of trained or anything, you're doing a lot of these things instinctually, right?
Absolutely.
Like the page turners. Very cool.
I want to say, I think, you know, if you have read a lot and, you know, you kind of absorb story structure. You know, if you've seen enough movies, read enough books, read enough comics, you kind of, you know, it's an osmosis process.
You know what, I agree with that, and I think that's one of the biggest problems I see with a lot of my students is they haven't read a lot. They consume entertainment, but they haven't actually read a lot. And I think we see that reflected in a lot of modern comics as well. You read a comic and you think, well, what are the problems going on here? And I think if you were to drill down to the source, they just haven't read a lot of comics. They may be writing this one, but they just haven't read a lot of comics. What about you, Brent? How did you take, you got the idea for Kayless. So how did you take Kayless and then turn that idea into a plot that is your story?
Well, what I said a little while ago was I had the idea about 10 years ago, and that really just was generated by comics. But as I really started thinking about how was I going to develop this into a story that had any kind of weight, I started doing a couple of things that had no relation to each other. One was I read the book Legacy of Ashes, which is about the history of the CIA. And it's a really interesting book, but largely it talks about, it could be, I suppose it's probably fairly controversial, and I'm not going to say, I know it's definitely from one person's point of view, but the idea was that the CIA had, throughout its history, it didn't have any oversight, no matter how much the presidential authority tried to bring to bear against it. Basically, the guys who ran the CIA, they won. And then I started thinking, what would be the craziest thing that the CIA would ever do? And, well, I mean, what if they actually had their own space program because they knew there was something in space they wanted to investigate? but they couldn't tell the American people about it. That's completely far-fetched, and except if you're looking at some of the history and the fact that they spent money like crazy and no one could stop them. And if they got an idea into their heads, nobody could talk them out of it. And then I started thinking about my people in space story. And suddenly I started to make connections like crazy about. This is what I think this is the kind of story I want to tell. It would be so, I love stories where idea that there's more going on than what you're being told, and there's all kinds of, I loved the X-Files when it was out, and just the idea that there was a story that had these amazing repercussions for all of humanity, but we're never going to know about it because we're basically just too busy and the government's just not really wanting to talk about it. I love that kind of thing. That really just it really gets my neurons firing. And so I think that was where I started really thinking I could turn this into a series. And then when I really just started to break it down in terms of like, well, how would I communicate the story in a way that wouldn't be just like, well, here's my guy and he did this, but and then I started thinking about the fact that I love stories that are told with lots of foreshadowing and hints of the future, but you have to stick with it to see what the connections are. And then I started thinking, I think that's the kind of story I want to tell with this. And so really what it amounted to, I guess, a short answer to your question is I just started looking at what I was already looking at the time, and if it was compelling enough, then I started considering it as viable material for developing Kayless. And eventually I sketched that in a way that I was like, man, I think this could be really cool. And the cool thing is I'm still doing it. I'm doing stuff that I think would blow people's minds if it ever could get into the story. Who knows what'll happen in a couple of years. I'm hoping I'll still be that way.
So I got to ask, I've taught creative writing long enough that I can't read any of the sticky notes behind you, but those look suspiciously like plot points for a story.
Yes. I am different from Sidney and John. I am a strict detailed outliner guy. And so you've got here, this is bridging this. You hear a lot about note cards on tape stuck to chalkboards. I'm more of a sticky note on poster boards. I find them a lot more mobile.
Right.
Mobile. This particular one bridges the gap between issues 1 and 2. What did I set up in issue 1 that I want to answer in issue 2? What do I not want to answer in issue 2 but push off till the future? What do I want to start in issue 2 and lead on from there?
So because this segment, I want it to be, craft and helping folks maybe kind of understand. Are each of the sticky notes there? Are each of those a plot point, or are they a scene? If you were to tell me just with one sentence answer, what is each sticky note?
Well, let's take a look. I actually put convenient headings at the top, not knowing you were going to ask.
Well, I didn't. You know what? I didn't think about it until listening to you talk about plot, and then I realized, wait a minute, he's got sticky notes behind him. I bet that's what those are.
Oh, look at this! But I got them all over my room. See, the entire room is circled with sticky notes. It's crazy. So
we mostly saw your thumb, but I got you.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Is that better?
Yeah, okay, I can see them now.
Yeah, there they all are.
They are really well organized. I've got sticky notes, but it's kind of like, remember that he has a gun in his,
Yeah.
Are each of the colors a different plot kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at this one here, the yellow is setups from issue 1, number 1 and number 2 that aren't resolved. The purples are mysteries solved or advanced. The light yellow ones are untouched mysteries, which is things that I set up in issue 2 and 1, but I haven't dealt with in issue 2. And then I have pink, which is new mysteries that I'll set up in issue 2 for dealing with
I've been doing it wrong all this time. I basically just go, who's fighting, who wins, and then I just draw something.
Well, I'll tell
Yeah,
you
that's
this.
because you're an artist.
Yeah, I will say this. This kind of story it's crazy that it's my first story because it's really pretty dense. Like in the meantime, I've written a 4-issue story, and I'm amazed how easily it came off when I didn't have to deal with things like, okay, do I want to reveal how he got his powers yet? No. I want to make sure people understand that it's still an issue. How am I going to do that? It's really pretty complicated. So I started out big.
I will say I do keep a Word document that I call it my quick notes on a particular project, and it's everything from character names to references, web references for research, and then just little details like that. So I do have something kind of like that so that it keeps me on track, or so that if there's a character name that slips my mind, I can go back and find it quickly and things like that.
Yeah, I do a lot of that too. Thankfully, I don't know if I've written one story each time. So
before we move on to let Barb answer that question, Tim, I'm going to catch you off guard here. I'm going to catch you by surprise. As an editor, right? If you've got a writer plotting with a bunch of Post-it notes, that's not real conducive to an exchange of ideas with the editor, right? I mean, shy of taking pictures of all the Post-it notes and sending it to the editor. How would you, if you're the editor, how would you handle trying to, and I realize I put you on the spot here, and I would apologize, but you're my COVID boy today.
I have to accept Corona Commander.
Corona Commander, yeah,
that's a good one.
So how would you kind of handle dealing with a writer like that? Because right, I'm thinking you might agree with me here. Those Post-it notes are really an insight into what the writer is trying to do, and an editor really wants to get to what the writer wants to do, and yet you might not see those because the writer is going to pick and choose the Post-it notes in his document to you, right?
Right, and luckily enough, I also work that same way. One of the best investments I've made. So I have these crosshatched different sections, different things, and I have a catch-all at the bottom. So, and like to John's credit, was saying earlier about working with his artist, comics being a collaborative form of art really comes down to synergy between all the parts involved. So having a writer thinks the same way as the editor, thinks the same way as the artist, can make all the difference. And so when I get a writer's outline or their first beat sheet or even the first script, however you have that, a lot of that is going to be the end result of all those Post-it notes after it's already been hashed through and pushed out. And my job then is to decipher all that. And so then, not trying to insult the writer, I'll kind of scrap their entire document, pull out all the parts that I need, and create my own document saying, okay, so as an arc with 4 issues here, and creating lines that we can explore if we get renewed for a second arc or however you do that. I'll create a secondary beat sheet, which then I'll send back with notes on the first 2 of them and say, all right, so this is what I gathered trying to do, and here's how I figured out we can make it work in the way that's best possible. And hopefully my sticky notes look like their sticky notes, but perhaps in a way that when it's all streamed out, we just have one single row that everybody can look at and say, okay, I get that. That's a story that I like. But it's that part of working with different minds and merging it all together, and trying to decipher Brent's 5 walls of poster board into one sheet that sort of all 3 or 4 parts can look at and agree this is the story we want to tell.
Yeah, and hopefully Tim would be quick to verify this. One of the things I talk about in my comic writing class is that editors in comic books often get a really bad rap, and I will be the first to admit that some of it is deserved. I mean, I've couple of you here have worked for Marvel and DC before, so you know that some of that is very well deserved. But it's always been my opinion, and the thing I try to teach in class, and hopefully Tim will confirm, is that an editor's job is not to tell the writer or the artist to say, "This is my story, go tell it." The editor's job is to make sure, number one, the writer is playing within the established sandbox. It's like, here's our sandbox. You can't throw the sand out of the sandbox. I'm sorry, you can't do that, right? And then the second thing is to make sure that the editor helps the writer get the story that the writer is trying to tell. Because a lot of time a writer is going to say, I've got this story to tell, but before I tell you the story that I really want to tell you, here's some really cool stuff that I want to talk about. And it's the editor's job to figure out, okay, that is cool. I confess that is very cool, but it doesn't help your story. It doesn't advance your story. It doesn't do your story any good. Yes. It's very, very cool. Let's put that in another file, and we'll use it later. And that's the editor's real job, is to try to as well as keep things on track and on target and that kind of stuff, is to kind of suss out what the writer is trying to do. And that's not always an easy task, especially, if you work with, fortunately, Silverline is not one of those kind of companies, but when you work with people that have very proud egos, it can be tough sometimes. I had a writer once tell me, a big name writer once tell me, when I made a suggestion to him of something that he needed to fix, he looked me in the eye and said, "Kid, I've written more hits than comics you've read," which wasn't true, of course, but he was trying to explain to me that he knew better than me and he was going to do whatever he wanted, regardless of what I said. Thank you, Tim. So, Barb, this gets this question to you then. So, and you may have touched on it a little bit already, but after you get this idea, and we're talking about Divinity for you in particular, after you got the idea for Divinity, how did you take that and turn it into a plot, turn it into a story? I know you already mentioned scripting, but that is a little something different than actually plotting the story. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm very old-fashioned creative writer. And you start out with your conflict, and eventually you have a resolution. But when you're doing comics, you don't want to reach the resolution, the major resolution, too soon. So you have the initial conflict, and then you have a series of smaller resolutions with smaller conflicts, and with the overarching umbrella of the major conflict always hanging over your head. And in the midst of all these smaller conflicts and smaller resolutions, you have bridging, because you have to get from point A to point B to point C before you can eventually, way down the line, hopefully 100 issues from now, reach point Z. And another thing that I like to have in my stories is I need a subplot. I can't have just one storyline. I prefer a major subplot. In Divinity, the subplot is the relationship between Zach and Vinny. They're vastly different in ages. They barely know each other. They need to build a relationship and become a family. They don't start out very well, but the point of the subplot is that eventually they're going to end up very close in a familial relationship. And then obviously you want to throw in maybe a minor subplot. And in Divinity, it's going to be the relationship between Olivia and Vinny, and probably the whole backstory to the evil, shadowy organization that's pursuing Vinny. But again, you want to draw this out, and it's got to be done in a realistic way so that it makes sense. You can't just say, "Oh, now I feel like having explosions. Now I feel like, oh, a kidnapping." You have to make it realistic. Why are the explosions coming? Why is it kidnapped? So it has to make sense to go from A to B to C to D. And you have to make it interesting. And that's the major issue when you write, is trying to hold the reader's attention. That's
I'm sorry, I was muted. I was sitting here trying to talk, and I was muted. Brett,
I wanted to say,
I
you
just
know,
sent you a link. You already
Barb,
popped it up.
Barb brought up a good point there too about, you know, the mini resolutions and you know, we all are working on obviously slightly different projects, but the Friar Rush is a 3-issue miniseries, so you know it's a little more finite than Kayless, where you know Brent has to think longer range and have even more story to unfold in a kind of an ongoing piece. And so it makes sense to parcel those details out a little more
You
slowly.
want to have a small, kind of a small but not final resolution at the end of Friar Rush, leaving it on a cliffhanger so that if it's a real popular,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
can go on.
yeah. Well, yeah, and we definitely, yeah. That's the
You
other
wanna-
thing is, yeah, open ended to some degree.
Yeah, you want to
Right.
finish. You want to finish the primary arc while leaving enough there that you can move forward. Barb, have you ever heard of the? I know you're going to know the person, but have you ever heard of the Levitt's paradigm? Brett, could you toss that up for everybody? Have you ever heard of the Levitt's paradigm?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you will like it since you're working on Divinity now. The Levitt's paradigm is essentially, and it's nothing new really to TV, but it's basically how do you take multiple plot lines and work them into your story as you move forward from one issue to the next issue to the next issue. It's something, I don't know if Tim remembers it, as something that I actually talk about in my class. We don't do multiple multiple issues in my class. We just don't have time for that. But it's something that I mention in the class because I want students to know if they're going to go on and do multiple stories, they need to know how to take their an A plot, a B plot, and a C plot, and move those from issue to issue to issue. I hope Brett was able to find that and toss that up. But I'll toss that to you, Barb. I think it is a great, and since we're talking about plot, I think it's a great way to plot story. And when you're thinking about that. All right. So for the we're running over, but if you guys are still,
Well, Roland, can you tell us a little bit about how you put your stories together? Because well, I mean, you are writing the story that you and I are working on.
Yeah, I am, but I was watching the clock and I kind of felt guilty because we were going over. But if you guys
just big fight, people fighting, boom, 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 done. Next.
So if you guys feel pretty good about hanging out a little bit, I think this craft segment is being a good one. Y'all gonna hang with me a little bit? Okay, cool. So all right, so I'll talk briefly about Cat and Mouse then. So Cat and Mouse, the idea came to me in an inspiration in the sense that it's not totally and wholly 100% mine. I met some artists and I met Stephen Butler in particular in college, and we decided that we both wanted to do some comics. He introduced me to his roommate, a guy by the name of Mitch Bird. Now, Mitch Bird was not really a huge comic fan, but he was a fantastic artist. He was a very good storyteller. Now, when Mitch first started, he was very, very rough. But Mitch had some little tiny little 4-page story, 6-page story, 12-page little things that he had just done at drawing. And so we were trying to figure out what to do. And he had this 4-page sequence drawn that had a couple of characters in there. And I asked him, I said, hey, who are these characters? He's like, well, they don't really have any names, but I'm thinking that this guy was a cop and she was maybe a thief. And so we sat down and we talked about it. And that's kind of how the original Cat and Mouse was born, from me sitting down with him, seeing his artwork, kind of being inspired by what he had done. And then the two of us just kind of tossing some things back and forth. I kind of took it in a way that he really didn't want it to go. But if you've ever met Mitch, he's not a real big talker. And so that's kind of the basic concept. When I got to the second volume, I decided that I wanted to keep the mood and the tone the same, but I wanted it to be obviously different characters. I didn't want the same characters to be involved. I wanted it to be different characters. And instead of the mob, the mafia, which is what the emphasis was on in the first volume, I wanted to take on something a little different. And as a parent, my kids are a little bit older now, but as a parent, one of the things that always scared me was human trafficking. The idea is that my kids could be kidnapped and I would never see them again, because this is a reality in the United States. You know, as a Southerner, we frequently hear, through all the media, how evil Southerners are for slavery and all that kind of stuff. And the thing that frustrates me as a person, as a human being, is that we have this going on today, and no one cares. And I shouldn't say no one, because there are certainly groups, but it seems to me, looking at this, that no one really cares about what's happening. And I live in Orlando now. Orlando is one of the top cities for human trafficking. And that really, really, really bothers me. It just bothers me. So I wanted to take that idea and apply it to a couple of characters that I liked. And that's kind of how the idea of Cat and Mouse, the project, came from. The second question, how did I turn it into a plot? Because I knew I wanted it to be about human trafficking, I always want my stories to be personal. So rather than having a couple of characters just go and try to save someone from human trafficking, I thought, well, what if one of my primary characters is caught up in that ring? What if one of the primary characters is one of the characters that is being human trafficked, and then the other character has to come along and rescue? And then that becomes my very visual plot. This character has to rescue that character. And of course, we live in a day and age where we don't want, I'm going to use the wrong terminology here, but we don't want any, I guess it's white knighting. So I didn't want the male character to just have to go in and, oh, look, the male is here, I'm going to say. So she's a strong character in here, and she does a lot of it, but there's still that fear because she's caught up in human trafficking. And ultimately, if you've been following Cat and Mouse, you know the two of them are going to team up to take on human trafficking. I won't give away a lot of spoilers. But that's kind of how, for me, how the idea turned into a plot is that, oh, okay, I got to have him, figure out where she is and figure out how to get her out of that. And therein lies how the conflict comes up, which is, of course, what drives the story. Thank you for asking, Thomas. I'll give you a cookie next time I see you.
A writer will talk about
good.
his work. It sometimes at the drop of a hat. Sometimes someone else has to drop the hat.
Yeah. All right. So then our last question here about when we're talking about plot is plot. So there's writers often talk about, and people often talk about, plot and character as two different things. And for the sake of this discussion, I do want them to kind of be considered as two different things. But as a writer, how do you take in character and make sure character and plot work together to tell your story? And Barb, we'll start with you again and go on my screen left to right again. So how do you take character and make sure that it fits with your plot, and that you're doing your plot a service and your character a service at the same time?
We're talking about the character, I'm not quite sure what you're saying.
So you have a primary character, right? You're a protagonist. How do you make sure that the protagonist is closely tied to the plot rather than having the world be the story?
Well, it's got to be personal. You've got to make it personal. It's got to be personal to the plot.
So how do you do that? How did you do this with Divinity?
Okay. It's got to resonate with the reader, for one thing, and it resonates with me first. The story's about a little girl. I'm a mother, so it kind of resonated with me, and it has to be something that can touch everybody that reads it. They have to find something to connect themselves, to identify with the character, so that the plot makes sense to them, they can put themselves into this character, and then the plot becomes real to them.
I mean, I think that's the perfect answer. Personal, and I would preach that all day long. Very cool. Very cool.
Identify with your character.
Yes. Yeah. Brent, what about you? How did you take Scott and since he is the protagonist of Kayless, how did you make sure that Scott was part of the plot? How do you make sure that you balance character with plot so that they're intertwined?
Right. Well, in this case, the plot probably came first, largely because Scott Anders is the main character, and he was a CIA agent, and he was an astronaut, which pretty much means that he had to be a white male. The space program, came up in the 50s and the 60s, largely at a time where discrimination was still largely being institutionalized throughout pretty much every branch of American life. The idea of having a woman or an African American or that he is that way, that is, he's as a white male, gives me opportunities to branch out from there and tell different kinds of stories that will involve more women and African Americans and Hispanic Americans and so on. But in this case, the plot largely dictated at least some of the characteristics of my main character. But then for me, the fun began in really trying to figure out who was this guy and why was he the one that this story deserves to have him as its main character. Something I do when I'm writing a screenplay, work with some other writers, and I like to play a game with them, and that is choose a movie and then think about why the main character against whatever antagonist they're going against, and why is the main character of choice to go against the antagonist. And a great example is Aliens. Why Ellen Ripley is the one who gets to go against the Queen? Why isn't it Linda Hamilton from the Terminator movies? Why isn't it Maximus from Gladiator? In that case, there's certain answers, but it's because she has just lost a daughter. And she is really dealing with issues of being a mother and having lost, and then has to go to this colony off world where she finds an orphan, and then has to face off against the queen mother of antagonists. And so when I started thinking through who my main character was going to be, I had to think about, okay, so an agent and an astronaut, but why is he interesting enough to carry a story? And so that's when I really started to get into, okay, well, this happened to him in his past. This is the kind of person he is. He wants to be our hero, and when it doesn't go well, he doesn't just quit. But that doesn't mean he knows how to make it right either. These are the kind of people that are going to get pulled his orbit because he's that way. These are the metaphysical questions he's going to face because he is the way he is. And all of that just kind of coalesces into the beginnings of a character, and then it just kind of builds from there over time for me, basically.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, John, what about you? How do you make sure that you are muted again? So before you start talking, realize that. How do you take a character and make sure that it's intertwined with plot so that the two of them mesh and work nicely together?
Awesome question. So as I mentioned before, with Sniper Interrupt in particular, I wanted to design the characters and their place in the universe so that they could go into different types of genres of stories that I wanted to be able to write. Across the 12 issues and in the future, covered everything from spy stories with espionage, action, sci-fi, romance issue, and then we're looking at things with, enhanced powered humans, because superheroes is trademark and copyright, not us. So what wound up happening is, as I started writing them, and I think I mentioned this before, I'm sorry if I'm repeating, but as I started to write them more, more and more came out that Sniper and Rook were different parts of me. So like Barb mentioned, that things have to be personal. Sniper and Rook, I affectionately refer to as my first kids. My son, who's about to be 15 on the 28th. Hey, John, happy birthday to you. Sometimes he's like, what do you mean first kids? I'm your only kid. I'm like, well, they kind of came first. So when I'm writing, the plot and I have the story, a lot of it is, how would I react to these scenarios? Rook has some of my traits, usually more my smart, intellectual, methodical traits. Sniper is kind of the joking, good-hearted, kind of white knight, but kind of a doofus at times, also traits of mine. So I'm kind of writing how they would react to those given scenarios and situations. And then the other thing that we didn't mention so far, outside of a lot of the main characters, when I start creating supporting characters that go through the whole scenario and who are they going to run into and where, it's, as we have the story, it's who would I need as a support? What would I need from an ally? And then that's how they kind of get written into that. So it's very personal for me.
Very cool. That's a nifty way to approach it. What about you, Sailor?
Barb's point that it needs to be personal, I think, is an important one, and I think that's kind of at the core of Friar Rush. My hero, as I mentioned before, Friar Rush is driven to corrupt people of the cloth, and so my male protagonist, Jake McGlover, is a reporter who was a seminarian, so he was on his way to be a man of the cloth, and his seminarian friend has gone on to become a priest, and he's one of the first people that Friar Rush preys on in the present day. So he has a very personal angle. His friend has been killed, and then he realizes that there's bigger corruption, and he has his own flaws. He failed at being a seminarian, and he has things to make up for, as well as a friend to kind of find justice for. My hero.
I have to confess that when I read Friar Rush and Jake is the reporter, I think of Jake. I'm like, yeah, Sid knew this guy. This is somebody Sid worked with, or maybe it really is Sid, or a little bit of everything, right? In it.
Yeah, it's a little of a lot of it. Yeah, it's the mystery writer, the detective writer Ross McDonald, once his character was named Lou Archer, which is probably Archer, the cartoon series, is a animated series, is probably a tip of the hat to that, but he wrote many books about Lou Archer, and the way he put it is, I am not Archer, but Archer is me. And that's probably true of McGlover. He is, I'm not McGlover, but McGlover is me in a lot of ways, or he certainly has aspects of me. Now, my heroine, Seraph, was I guess we're giving a little away here, but she's sort of an immortal character because of a medieval encounter with Friar Rush and her own failings when she was a novice. So she is making up for her own flaws as well. And all of that weaves into the plot of trying to face Friar Rush in the present day and prevent him bringing on great corruption in the present era and everything. The more all of that intertwines, the better the story. And the more it becomes, I think, an engaging story and a meaningful story when we have character just completely interlaced with plot. It's not just about what happens, it's who it's happening to. And the character, when the character is right for the story, will be changed or influenced in a meaningful way by the end of the story, which is where what we're really all trying to do is tell satisfying stories. And when there is an arc and there is something of meaning apparent at the end, I think that is very satisfying. And it's also satisfying if there's a logical progression for how things come together. But when all of that is, kind of interlaced, as I was calling it, then theme really kind of emerges from all that. And I think also a story is ultimately very satisfying if theme, character, and plot all mesh really nicely. There's a mystery writer named Doug Allen, and often the title of his stories will also be tied to the theme a bit. There's one called The Big Blue Marble, and there's actually a blue bowling ball in the story that's kind of a big blue marble in a character's past, but then the big blue marble of the world factors into it, and we get a satisfying mystery story, but we also get a character arc, and that happens in almost every Doug Allen story. So it's certainly a writer I look to try to go, okay, yeah, that's the bar. That's what we need to work toward.
Very cool. Yeah, I think for me, and then we'll kind of wrap up the craft here. For me, I think even when I think of plot, I think that a character, if I think of a cool plot without the character, I might think about the plot a little bit, but then I have to say, okay, this character has to be the one to come in and run the plot. Much like I mentioned, the idea of human trafficking. The human trafficking kind of was the idea and the story that I wanted to tell, and then for me, I wanted to make sure that the characters are the ones that drove the plot. I don't want. I try to make sure that the plot doesn't drive character, but character drives plot. If that makes sense, because I think that we don't ever want to get caught up in as much as I like something like Dune, Dune is more a plotty story than a character story. A lot of characters in it, but it's more of a plotty story than a character story. So, well, thank you all. Those are some very, very cool discussion about plotting and craft. BJ, do we have any comments or any questions out there that we can answer before we call it a night?
We do have some comments, and they're from Jerry J14 off of Twitch. And I think the earlier ones were in response to Sid, and they are flaws on characters is the ideal, really. It's when they are explored and used that the most interesting storylines are created. It feels like a heavy felling if a writer creates a Mary Sue character as their protagonist.
Yeah.
The next one is, even if it's one critical failure and they seem nigh almost perfect, that flaw can create such nice things. And then later on, well, and we also have from YouTube, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, but I think it's Herrenberg saying hi to Roland. We're on the crowdfunding comics stream right now. Can't
What's
wait
up, Manny?
to see you in Pittsburgh.
Cool.
And then well, two more comments. Again, from Jerry J14 off of Twitch. I feel like a big issue that people have is learning to balance and bounce between the main plot, the subplot, and any momentary conflicts or plots, especially when the different plots have different tones. It can become super awkward.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I think he's on point there, because it's difficult to balance all of those, and when unskilled writers are trying to do that, I think it really shows. So okay.
Last comment.
Okay.
Sorry, YouTube, Herrenberg. The last one is at SilverlineComics. Thanks about being excited about going to Pittsburgh, and what a creative lineup.
Yeah, we got a good bunch here. We're incredibly proud of the talent Silverline has very fortunately gathered up here. So,
Roland, I think before we get away, we should go back to the shot of the coloring, because it's developed so much during the course of this discussion.
Yeah, I'm going to go back, and we're going to see if we can't get Tommy and Jeremy to show their big pages so we can kind of see the progress that they've had on all the different platforms. I know that we are streaming to Facebook, we're streaming to Twitch, and we're streaming to YouTube. Wherever you're watching, please don't forget to give us a like, give us a follow, give us a subscription, give us a heart. Please share it as well. We were talking the other day with the group on YouTube. I can't name the channel until we get to 100 subscribers. And the last I looked, I think we had 7 or maybe 8. So we need you guys to share it around, encourage people to like, to follow, to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything to do all that. And then we hope to be back here every week. I do apologize that we went a little bit longer than I intended for us to go tonight, but I think it was I can't blame it all on Martin. I would like to, but I can't blame it all on Martin's video. But I think we had some really good discussion here, and that's really what I hope. It's really what I hope the bulk of the Silverline Lives turn into. Yes, of course, we want to promote our stuff, and that is what we are going to do. But hopefully we can bring some substance that has value to those who are watching. So Brett, why don't you pop Jeremy back up there? And Jeremy, show us kind of what you've done, where you got on the page this last hour and a half-ish, or almost 2 now.
Well, I got the majority of the rendering done right now. One of the last things I've done is I applied the main filter I do for the give it sort of the sort of like a purplish bluish effect for the more of a horror look. Then now I'm doing now is going in and giving, let's call it burn effect for the clothing here on the characters. What I'm trying to do is sort of emulate the look of the mummy here.
Ah, cool.
I'm trying to do that on these pieces of clothing here. Then also I'm trying to do little effects here for the wall being blasted as well.
All right. I love the color hold there.
Yes, thank you.
I'm a big fan. I think you and I talked about this once before. I'm a big fan of color holds. Now, Jeremy, I noticed the page number there is 16. If I'm not mistaken, I think Bloodline's 26 pages, 28 pages, 28, right?
Yes, I have 26.
26. Okay, so my question to you then is, do you take these sequentially? So does this mean you have essentially 16 pages almost finished when you're done, or 16 pages finished when you've completed this one?
Usually what I do is I sort of do it in batches. So I'll do like I'll basically, it's called flatting. So what I do is I'll do like I'll flat 5 pages at a time that I'll go through and render out the 5 pages I flatted. Flatting basically is when I go in and I'll pull up and show you. Pull up.
We're actually gonna, hopefully one of the things that one of the craft sessions we'll do will be on flatting. If we can get maybe you and maybe Tommy and if we can get another colorist in here to actually talk about flatting.
Okay. Here you go. So this is page 14, part of the current set I'm doing. So flatting is basically just basic colors before I do any rendering or any color corrections. It just gives me the basic underlying colors I can then render and color over.
Nice.
So I have pages 11 through 16 flatted. So I'm sort of jumping back and forth between 11 to 16.
Okay.
I do it this way because when I do it in batches like this, it's easier for me to keep the colors more correct throughout the pages. Instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, and then hoping the colors are correct as I'm moving along. If I do it in batches, it's easier for me to keep it correct across the pages.
Nice. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So for some of you listeners, don't run away yet. We're gonna have a little giveaway here at the very, very end. So so don't just run away just yet. Very cool, Jeremy. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll count on you being here again next week so we can watch some more pages. So Tommy, what about you? Where are you at? Show us your progress here on this Trump's page.
Well, I'm doing all kind of little noodly details in the faces here, so I pretty much got them to where I like them. But this is actually part 2 of, I don't know, how are we breaking this up, because there's we've got a different artist for part of it, a penciler, and then a different artist, then Thomas has taken. And so I'm kind of jumping back and forth between both of the pencils to get,
Yeah.
yeah, so.
Well, I think long story short, I'm not exactly sure yet. My instinct for the moment is for us to crowdfund them in 2 books, so
Yeah.
a book 1 and a book 2, but do it and still do the stories in such a way that once we eventually get into stores, we'll have 4 issues for the miniseries.
Yeah.
So, but for
yeah.
crowdfunding purposes, I think we'll do them as a book 1 and a book 2. Cool. It's looking good, and that is Trump's. So, all right. So for our little giveaway that we're going to do here, Brett, I'm going to need you to look at me here for a second. We have some I just dropped it. We have some Make Mine Silverline wristbands, and you can see I'm sporting mine. I tend to sport mine all the time now. If I can hold that up there. Make Mine Silverline, and then it's got the website on the opposite side. So the first person on Facebook, Facebook Live stream, the first person on our Twitch, and the first person on the YouTube channel to say "Make Mine Silverline," we will mail you in a little envelope like this. I'll just put it in here, and we will mail you a Silverline Make Mine Silverline wristband bracelet thingy, whatever they're called. So the first person on each of those platforms. So we're going to be sending out 3 of them. All right. So the last thing we're going to do, I'm going to go down Murderer's Row. Y'all tell folks where they can find you on social media. Obviously, we want everybody following the stream here. We want you to like the Silverline Facebook page. Please go check out Kayless 2. The Kickstarter is still going. We are 1 week in. Still have 2 weeks to go. I believe with all my heart of hearts that we can get to $2,000. Brent and I are working on some cool stretch goals, and I think we can make that, and that's fun. So please go check that out. Barb, where can people find you on social media?
I'm on Twitter, BJKLBRG@AOL.com. I am the only Barbara Kaylberg on the internet, so I'm not exactly hard to find. It's KAALBERG. So look Barbara Kaylberg up on Facebook. I have a good following there. And if you Google me, you'll come up with about 12,000 sites.
Wow, cool. Brent, what about you? Where can people find you on social media, you hermit you?
Yeah, it's funny, actually, being on this show makes me, challenges me to go out and do more stuff. I'm scared to death of Twitter. If I get on there, I am obsessed with my own cleverness. If I get on there, I will never do another day of work again. So I don't do Twitter. I should, but I don't. I'm on Facebook, Brent Larson, look me up. I post updates on Kayless and different stuff like this show and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Soon I'm working with a friend to get me up on my own website.
Nice.
I'm hoping that will happen very soon, but I said that a week ago and nothing's happened since then.
And then we can welcome you to 1999, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. ICQ, yes.
That's right.
AOL,
John, what about you?
All the way.
Where can fans find you, John?
Best place for me right now is Facebook, facebook.com/beta3comics. I've got Silverline and the subset Beta 3 updates on there. Or you can just do a Google search for me, John Metych, last name METYCH.
Metych and not Metch, as I said for years and years and years. And John, I apologize.
Yeah.
So remember, we're not done yet, but remember, we need to Make Mine Silverline. Somebody shout out on all 3 of the platforms there. Jeremy, where can fans find you on social media?
Well, right now my main source would probably be on Twitter at Jeremy M. Kahn. And I do have a website with some coloring work that I've done over the years at jeremycahn.org.
Okay. Very cool. That's Brad. Sid, what about you? Where can fans find you on social media?
There are quite a few Sidney Williams out there and quite a few Williamses out there. So I'm the opposite of Barb. SidIsAlive.com is my website. Sid, SidIsAlive.com. And you can find most of my other social media presences there. I'm Sidney_Williams on Twitter. And it's Facebook.com/Sidney Williams Books will find me also. And I will friend and follow you back wherever you track me down.
Because you want friends, right?
I want friends. I'm very desperate for friends.
And I should add, as we go through here, Silverline, the various Silverline sites does its very best to try to retweet, repost, redo everything from the Silverline creators. Was there another one, Sid?
Just anywhere you wanna find me. And there's actually a teen model named Sidney Williams, so that's not me. If you you run across,
I'm gonna have to drop that one. I thought that was you this whole time.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Doing another life.
No, I was going to say,
I look anything like when you're on the show.
Yeah, the beard, everything is different. No, I saw somebody saying earlier on, speaking of social media, it's a well-known artist saying how much he hated promotion, and I do hate promotion, but nobody else is going to say your name. So.
Right. That's
maybe Roland will.
Well, well, and that's one of the things that writers have to realize in this day and age. You really have to kind of promote yourself, and most creators that I know of, and that's not all, but most creators that I know of are not real comfortable flying their own flag. Some are, of course, and some of those we look at them and say, man, he's such a egotist, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of one in particular, but no names here. We do have
it's me, isn't it? You're talking about me.
No, not you at all. No one here in this stream.
I'm not paranoid.
Tommy, what about you? Where can fans find you on the interwebs?
Well, it's spelled Florimonte, FLORIMONTE. All the sites, just look up Florimonte and I'll be on there. But you could go to infernostudios.com and that'll point you at all the stuff. So it's just look for Florimonte. It's the only one. There's no others. I'm more like Barb than Sidney. There's just one. So there, just look for Florimonte.
All right, very cool. And Tim, what about? Oh, it's special. Tim, what about you? Where can fans find you on social media?
I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Tim TK Writer. If you just Google Tim TK, you will get Tim Kahashi, the ESPN sportscaster. I am also on TikTok at Tim Doesn't TikTok. And
and yet you do.
And I'm here on Twitch at Aggrobacon, and I might aggro as in aggravation, and I might be streaming Endless Legend later tonight or tomorrow.
Oh, very cool, very cool. Yeah, and Tim is also kind of the unsung hero behind the Silverline website now. Yeah, actually he deserves a round of applause. So everyone watching, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe and follow. And remember, whoever says make mine Silverline gets to be, it does it first on each of the streams.
I'm gonna go on there right now.
Yeah.
I've got
one. Here, do we all get it?
Yes, let's go. I'm gonna go first.
I should say, what is it? The fast voices come on. Employees of Silverline are going to be excluded, right?
Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
We need to do something fun, like coordinate. Like I'll throw a pencil from here, and Barb catches it.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys you guys don't bail when we end the stream. Anything else you guys can think of before we go?
We need to let the audience go. It's getting late.
Yep. It's been 2 hours. Thank you so much for hanging with us, everyone.
Oh, it's 4 minutes past curfew. I can't go outside now.
We will see you next Wednesday at same Silverline time, same Silverline channel. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.